it off from here. All right. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to the deep dive meetup. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Joseph Ramirez. I'm the president for the Deep Dive Alumni Committee. Stevan Martinez is also on the committee as well. And usually I ask him if there's any kind of special announcements, such as job postings or anything like that, which he usually tends to post, but he's not here at the moment. So thank you for coming. I'm excited to hear about this presentation. And I have no current announcements except for anyone interested in JavaScript. We're planning on doing a JavaScript and another CSS challenge. Probably the JavaScript is going to be next month, I believe, and the following month will be the CSS challenge. So keep eyes out for that. If you're in a JavaScript or if you're in a CSS, we're gonna probably have that in person, or we might have it over online. We're still kind of determining that. Other than that, I don't have any other announcements, so I'll let you go ahead and take it over, Yvette. Oh, we can't hear you anymore.
There we go.
Okay.
I was going to say that I guess I've already introduced myself, but yep, my name's Yvette, and in this presentation, we're going to talk about Figma. In case I forget to say it at the end, if at any point you want to talk more, I'm somewhat active in the deep dive Slack, so if you are in there, feel free to message me if you have follow-up questions or anything that I don't know that you think could be helpful. I'd be happy to help if possible. If you're not in the deep dive Slack, you can find me on LinkedIn. So if you want to get a hold of me, but I'm excited to share Figma with you. And like I mentioned, started off, well, before I was in boot camp, I've worked with technology for a long time, but I worked in a call center for about 10 years and did tech support and in just different positions in that capacity, which was really fun. And then I decided I wanted to make apps. And so I went to the boot camp, which was really fun. And then I decided I wanted to design apps. So that's what I'm doing today. And this is my favorite design tool. So I'm going to share my screen with you here so that you can see Figma. And also as a reminder, if you don't already have a Figma account, this is the first like half or so of this. I'm just going to show like the lay of the land of Figma, but then the second half we're all gonna, unless you just don't want to, you don't have to, but everyone's invited into the file to practice some of these things. So for the first part, I'll just be sharing my screen, and then for the second part, I'll share a link, and you'll need a Figma account to get in. So Figma is free, so you can go to figma.com and sign up there if you don't already have an account. So I'll tell you why Figma is such a great tool, then show you around, and then we'll get in there and make some designs. And also if there's time, not sure we will have time, there are some extras I'd like to show you that like the community files and plugins and things that are available. But if we don't have time, then I'll share something on the Meetup page, I think, if it lets me do that, to share those resources with you. Because one of the things that I love about Figma is the extensive community and lots of tools and things that are out there. So you don't have to completely start from scratch if you are just working on some quick side project or just getting started and want to see some other ways of doing what you're trying to accomplish in Figma. There's all kinds of cool stuff. So the first design tool that I started learning was Adobe Xd. And for anyone that's familiar with any Adobe products, I think that's a great tool to learn. And then I got started this job, which was my first full-time role doing UX. And they had a couple contractors make prototypes for them, and they were all done in Figma. So they were like, we kind of like Figma, whatever tool you pick is fine. So I did a bunch of evaluation, and Figma came out on top in a lot of ways. And because we could start with it for free and it was so collaborative, I really invested time into learning Figma, which I'm really glad I did. I feel like Figma is pretty intuitive if you have a background in anything on the web, because there's a lot of concepts that translate, that intentionally are brought into Figma, because it is really a tool for building for the web, versus if you are making design in Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. Those are, Illustrator is for primarily for print products. And so they're not going to have things like responsive screens or prototyping. You don't have things like components, but in Figma, there are components. So if you are familiar with the acronym of DRY, don't repeat yourself, then you would appreciate the components in Figma. You can make something one time and use it in multiple places within the file across different pages. And if you make an update to the main component, then it updates to all of the children or instances in that file. And if you have the paid version of Figma, you can actually have libraries. So like I'm working on starting a design system, and I have a few files where some of those components live, and I can publish them as a library to receive all those in my other files, which is really cool. So it's some similar things there, and it's for bigger teams, helps people be consistent for their products and across their teams. For smaller teams, it helps us be more effective because there are fewer people to do these things. So, and then when I get into the tool here, and let me know if you can see my screen now. Okay, thanks. So we'll start with just like I said, the lay of the land, or the canvas as it were in this case. And this is the canvas right here. You can change it to whatever color you like. I've gone dark mode today, but this dark area is the canvas. And on the left, we've got a left sidebar, we've got a right sidebar on the right, and we've got this top area here. So I'm just gonna kind of go around, and we'll start with the left side. So on the left sidebar, sorry, there's a zoom control in my way, hold on. I don't know how to make that go away. Okay, so on the left side, you've got your different pages, and I've created 2 pages. With the free plan, you get up to 3 pages, and then you reach your limit. So each page is within the same file. So if you're working on one project, you might just keep it in one file if it's a smaller project. I tend to divide mine up to like features or concepts. So if like I'm like iterating on a design, sometimes I do a different file each day. So it just depends on how you like to organize yourself. So these are the different pages here, and within the pages underneath that, you'll have these different frames. So if there's different types of frames, and I'm actually going to see if I can increase the scale here, because I remember it being very difficult to see over screen share. Is everyone able to see this clearly? Or let me know if you can't, because I can't see everyone's faces. All right, well, assume you're good. Let me know if you're not. So these are frames, and there's different types of frames, and frame is anything that's on the canvas. And this is an example, a very handy screenshot I grabbed from Figma's website of the different types of frames, because they're represented with these different symbols. And so a regular frame here versus a group, I tend to always use frames to put things together, because you can organize them with things like auto layout, and you can have background colors and border radiuses and things like that, all familiar to you if you worked with the web. And then you can have a lot less of that with groups. So I use groups pretty sparingly. But a group would be something like you could group multiple things into a group. So like if I select these items and then group them, they'll collapse into this, which can be nice and tidy if you need to clean up the number of frames here for any reason. Of course, you can name all of your frames. So you'll see some of them I've named. You've also got the component. So that's going to be this purple one. And if you use a component by copying it and using it elsewhere, it's going to be considered an instance of the component. And these frames are available in different sizes. So since Figma's for the web, when you go to add a frame, which you can do with this button up here, you can choose to add a frame, and then you'll have these different frame types here. So I'm just going to kind of leave that there, but there's a bunch of different ones. You can even use them to make like a LinkedIn cover, which I haven't done, but all different sizes of frames. And so those are just going to be sized according to the option that you choose, which is really neat. So I often will draw my own frames manually for different things. And then we've got text object, which is this little option here, just plain text. You've got your shapes. and you've got images, and I've never used GIFs, but you can use GIFs in Figma. And those are the different types of layers. There's also this tab here where your components can be, or if you have a library, which is what this lets you access. There may be a lot of things in your assets, but this is the panel that you're going to use a lot with your frames. And when you open up any of these, you can just see how things are nested. So typically I try to name things to keep organized, just like you might do in any other layer application. So this is this is a button that I made, and I think I labeled it button, but inside of that I just have some text. So I don't always label every single frame, but I just try to organize them in a way that I know what they are, why something's containing another frame. So any thoughts on the frames before we go on to the next piece?
Real quick, do you map a page to a workflow or a screen? How do you conceptualize that?
When you say map it, do you mean, can you kind of elaborate what you mean by mapping it?
Do you work on like a screen, each individual page? Do you see as a screen or as a as a web page or as a workflow?
I see. It depends what I'm doing. For a lot of what I do, I'll take a piece of it. So for example, lately I've been working on adding a little bit more complex filtering. And so I'll start with like one screen to help remember where I'm going to be putting this filtering, but then I often end up just copying that filter panel and working within that so that I don't have the full screen. So it's really a component. But if I'm prototyping or if it's something really simple, then I might do screens. This is like a desktop screen that I just sort of threw together as like you can use this just for simple wireframing, just to get some basic concepts down. And you might say this is the home page and then duplicate it and then do the next page and do them as pages. So really either one works depending what you're trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So let's see. Well, maybe we should talk about prototyping actually first. So prototyping is the center tab on the right sidebar. The reason I thought prototyping might be kind of fun is because it kind of relates to how these frames and how to kind of connect them. And since you mentioned workflow, this is what makes me think of this. So I already have this little button that I made here, and what I thought I would do is just if you're in the prototype mode, you'll see the little blue dot here, and you can still copy things and move them over. So I've made a copy of my button. I'm going to place it here, and I'm going to make another copy of it and place it on the next slide here, and we'll just prototype them really quickly. You'll notice too that there are snap to grid functions, so like it helps you keep things in line unless you like to disable that. And so I'm just going to rename my button and put it over here. And so if you're prototyping, you can do a lot of things with prototyping, but in its real simple form, you just connect things with lines. You have some different prototyping options. So you can do it on click, which works for a lot of mouse-based interfaces, but you can also do on drag or things like tooltips while hovering, or when the mouse enters to show hovering, different effects. And there are some limitations in how many you can layer. They also have these really nice built-in animations. So we can do this smart animate, which is kind of just my go-to when I'm just not being really particular. I want something that looks kind of decent. So if I press next, I want to go to the next slide. And if I press, oops, I accidentally used my component here. So they have a beta feature where if you apply a prototype to your component, it affects all the instances of the component, but that's not what I actually want. So let me switch that out. Here. Okay, so if I press next, I want to go to the next slide, smart animate, and then if I want to go back to the next slide and smart animate that. So then you can click this play button to view your prototype. This is where it gets really fun. And this, let's see if it, I think because I have resized the interface that happens. So you start at the beginning and then you can you can kind of see the animation that's happening there. So that's a really, really simple example of prototyping, and you obviously can do as many pages or screens or interactions as you need or want to. So that's the prototyping tab there. And you can also choose like what device to display this on. So if you wanted to, I've never designed anything for the Apple Watch, but I did design an iPhone app early this year, and it was really cool to use these. Basically, it displays whatever on the screen of that device, which is really helpful, especially if you're, it's very different to design for the web versus an app or even just a mobile interface. So it's helpful to have that there and feels more real to you if you have a device that frames your prototype in that way. So that's really basic about prototyping. And then you've got this design tab, which is where when you're designing, and typically I'll do a lot of design before I start prototyping, unless I'm starting with a wireframe, and then I'll do a bunch of wireframes and prototype those all up and make sure I've got all of that thought through before I actually start making things look prettier. So in the design tab, you've got different things. You can see the background color here, which is a hex code. You've got your text styles. So this is something I added. I just took this font, which is my favorite font, and I saved it as a text style. So what this means is if I decided to change my text style later, like I'll show you right now, I can change it to anything, and it's going to update that text throughout the wherever that's being used. So if it works. Let's see. And it uses Google fonts. So that doesn't look like Wingdings to me. I feel like something might not. Oh, I see. It doesn't. Let me see. It doesn't like that it's bold. There's no bold font. There you go. So it'll update the font wherever I've used that font with that style. So that's another way to work really efficiently. If you have a huge, massive file, or even if you're just trying different fonts, it's nice to be able to quickly change that style and have it throughout the file and not have to painstakingly modify every single frame where your text is appearing. So I've got a couple text styles. Like I mentioned, Google fonts, but you can use local fonts too. And then I did the same thing for color styles. There's a little plugin for color palettes that I just grabbed some colors and threw them in here, a randomly sort of generated palette. And then if I change the shade of purple, it's the same idea that wherever I've used that, it's going to appear. So if I change my slide to match one of my library colors, like say this purple, well, I've labeled it blue. And if I go and change my styles, which I should mention, I'm not selected on anything right now. I'm like I don't have a frame selected, so that's when this design tab will appear. So if you are following along with me at all at this point, then you'll notice that this varies depending what item you've selected. So if I select a slide, you'll see that panel changes. And if I'm showing selected here with this little bit of a highlight, if I'm not selected on anything, then I can view my styles. And so if I modify this shade of blue, something a bit darker, then anywhere that I've used that color is going to update. So that's what the concepts of the styles are. You can export things. So you can, if like say you're doing a project and you want to send it to a client for review, Figma is great. You can send them a link, and that's what we're about to do here to send to you. But if you want to export an actual PDF, you can. I use a lot of SVGs for icons. So you can export SVGs and give them to a developer to implement in a browser and things like that. So that covers that main thing. And then we've got the inspect. So if you are using inspect, you can view the different CSS properties. And it's not good enough CSS. You probably don't want to copy and paste it, but it can be a really good starting point, or really more just to get a sense of like what the designer was hoping this would look like in the browser. So if you select an item, like say the slide, then you'll see things like the width and the height, the colors, and you can change choose different, I forget what that's called, but different types of colors. And you can change the different type of code. So that's pretty cool. It really helps. If I found the developers that I work with really like it. It means that they don't have to be like measuring things with rulers, or I don't have to write all kinds of documentation to explain it. Like I can just design it be consistent in my designs, and they can look at the code, like they can look at the inspection panel and then move on from there. So here's another example with the button. This is using something called auto layout in Figma, which is really similar, basically based off of the idea of Flexbox. So I might be saying that wrong at this point. It's been like over a year since I've really thought very hard about CSS, but you can see that the padding is here, the border radius, and then the width and height and so forth. And because I've used auto layout in Figma, if I change, you can see that the box, like the button body, expands. So that's one of the things that auto layout lets me do. But you can see all of this, what's updated when you do that. So you can copy it as well. That's everything on the right panel. And then these things are really like blended in. So you have different file options in here for Figma under this little Figma symbol. You've got your move button. I never use scale. I think it's to zoom in and out, but I use my mouse wheel and the control button to do that, just to go in and out of something. This is a limitless canvas. You can have like a lot of stuff. I've never had so much stuff that my Figma even crashed. So I haven't run into a practical limit, but you could have a lot of things and it's limitless. So you do scroll in and out a lot to move around. And you've got your frames, your shapes, the pen tool. I've used the pen tool to make a few icons. I'm not, like I said, a graphic design background, so they are kind of basic icons, which you can do that and then export them as SVGs. Got your text and you got your hand tool, which mostly I just, mostly I use my mouse for that. And then you've got commenting. This is one of those more interactive pieces. So you can drop a comment, which looks like this little pin, like a little location pin on any, basically any frame or place on the canvas. And you can add your message there and post it. Their commenting's not amazing. I wouldn't use it for anything really serious because it's very simple, but it's nice to just be, sometimes I'll tag my product manager and be like, hey, Kyle, what do you think of this? Or I'll write some documentation in here of my designs and be like, did I forget anything? So it's a nice way to tag them and get them our attention. But I would be, there are some little problems, like if I move some things around, sometimes the comments, you can move the comments and you may accidentally move them and put them somewhere else, and they come in the file and they're like, what are you talking about? There's nothing here. So it has some limits to the commenting. And you've got your file title here. So I'm going to send you the link, which is accessed from the share button. Mentioned that's the prototype, like present button. I've already set this one up so that anybody with the link can view this file. But you can, by default, I believe it's only if you're invited to the file. So I'm going to send that on over to you guys. And if you want to open the link, then you'll be able to, I can find the comment box in this view. Then you'll be able to join me in the file chat. And I didn't mention at the beginning that Figma is a browser-based tool. So there is a desktop app, which I use almost exclusively, and I love, and it works great. But you can do it in the browser without having to install anything, which is what I think makes it a great tool for collaborating, because maybe your whole team is not wanting to use or even create a Figma account. If you didn't have a Figma account, you would be able to view this file. You just wouldn't be able to edit anything. So it's great for view access for people. And then you'll see that once you're in, that you can see each other's cursors with each other's names there. You took a little cursor bump, which is great when you're talking through stuff. If you are talking with your team and you're like, hey, find my cursor, there is the option to click the little avatar, and then it jumps to wherever their cursor is. So if I'm like, hey, come find me over here, you can click my avatar, and then you'll see what I'm looking at. And that helps you. That's one less reason to share your screen. It's really great. I'm only sharing my screen so that you can see the controls, which don't show up in that. You wouldn't see my version of the controls. So you're in the file. Is anybody not in the file that is having trouble accessing it? If you're ready, then
I think I'm in. I don't. It's different than what's your screen share is, but
is it? What is different about it?
let's see. Okay. Just my colors, I think.
Ah,
Yeah, so, okay, so, yeah, okay, I think we're good.
okay. So I thought you're free to stay on this page if you like, but my plan was that we just go to this other page and just start doing stuff. So one of the things that I think would be useful little exercise is to just make a button and then make it into a component. And then we can make a little UI card and we can explore some of the different simple features there. Is that, let's see. Let me see if we have. Okay, so the first thing to do to make your button is just to add some text. So if you have a split screen, or if you can split your screen or you have dual monitors, it might be easier to follow along. Or if you're really comfortable already and you don't need to follow along, don't feel like you're missing out. My screen is just here to show you where the controls and the steps that I'm taking. So the first thing is just add some text. So just click the text button and just click anywhere on the canvas and add some text, and then write the name, whatever you want to call your button. And once you do that, you're going to see that appear in the left sidebar. So whoever's adding buttons, we're going to start seeing more of them pop up in there. And you'll be able to change as long as you're active, as long as you are actively on that frame, that text frame that you just added, you'll have the design panel show things like the text. So you can change whatever text font you like, any boldness and all those different properties you would expect to see for text. You can modify those. I'll go with a semi-bold today. And once you've got your text button in there, and we're going to do an auto layout, which is, like I said, my favorite feature. Auto layout saves a lot of time and trouble. Especially I use it a lot because I like components, but after we make the button and do the UI card, you'll see more of the power of the auto layout. So I've got one button. I think there's only a couple of buttons in here. Are you all finding the second page with the little emoji hand? Or you can click my avatar and it'll jump you into the page. So that's another way to get there. So once you've got that, I'm just going to wait for like 2 more people to have their buttons so I don't get too far ahead. I'm actually not seeing a ton of people in the file, and that's okay. Like, obviously it's optional participation, but if you aren't getting in and you want to get in and you're having problems, just let us know. So once you've got your button, we're going to apply an auto layout. There are keyboard shortcuts for everything, but for today, I'm just going to use the right click. So if you right click, and then you'll have an option that says auto layout, add auto layout. And again, you have to be selected on your frame. I see one auto layout in there. It lanes it just like frame and then a number. So this might be a good time to rename your frame. You can just go and double click on it. There's also the shortcut. You can press Control R and then rename it. Maybe just put your name and your button or whatever you'd like to call it so you can identify it. Once you've got that, the nice thing about this type of frame, auto layout, like another type of frame, you can add a background color. So that's going to be, if you're selected and you're actively on that frame, then you're going to be able to go and add a fill color, and that's basically your background fill. So I'm just going to pick from the color palette. You can do that if you like, or you can add any color code you want to for your fill. And there's also things like you can do a stroke, which is basically a border. I don't use that a whole lot, but you can make your button look however you like. There's other cool effects, like you can do effects such as drop shadow. They have like a quick default drop shadow, and you can customize it however you like. It spits out CSS for that too. So that's cool. And then once you've got just some style stuff on your button there, I'm also going to apply a radius. I like rounded edges, so I give mine a border radius of, let's say, 6 here. And that's my button. And then I'm going to make it into a component. So I'm trying to gauge without seeing you. It's one thing I can't tell. Does anyone need any pointers while they're making their button, or shall I go on? We got some buttons here, so. Once you've got your button created, I want to make a component so I can reuse the button anywhere I like. And with a component, you can change like the text, for example. So it doesn't have to be an exact copy. It's going to be an instance of that component. So to do that, there's a keyboard shortcut, but I'll right click and then say, actually, I always use Control-Alt-K. There it is. Create component. I love that they have all their shortcuts listed here on the menu, because if you're working in here a lot, it's really helpful reminder. So you can create the component, and then you'll see it appear with the little purple diamonds, I guess, and you've got your component. So to use your component, once you've created your component, you're going to just either copy it and then paste it. So you can do Control-C, Control-V, or you can just do Control-D, which duplicates it. You can right click it, and I'm not sure if there's an option for that. I actually always do Control-D. So I just do Control-D to duplicate it. The interesting thing here, especially if you're watching my screen or you just did this, you'll notice that the duplicate version is immediately on top, so it doesn't look to you on the canvas as though you've actually duplicated it. But if you look on the left sidebar, you'll see that they're there and they're just stacked on each other. So then you can move the one that you just duplicated. Another cool little thing about components that I will just show you while some more buttons are being made there, the newer feature that Figma had is called variance. And so you can make a variance button. So let's say typically you're going to have like states. So this is just my active button. And let's say I want to have a variant, which is like a pressed button, or I'm saying pressed because lately I've been working with printers. I can't remember what that's called on the web. Selected, but anyway, whatever you want to call it, you'll be able to you can name your variants and then just style it differently. So I'm going to style this button like let's say a little bit darker. I like to use, could just change the color or however you like. I'm just going to change it and make it, maybe I'll make an inactive button. Actually, I think I'll just do that. I'll make a gray button. I'll make the button gray, and maybe I'll remove that. I'll change the color of the stroke as well. So it's not, you also have the little color picker. So I've just made this button. So now I have the default, I have this property here. So I'll say active, and then I've got my variant, and I'll name it inactive or disabled.
I didn't make a variant. You just copy it?
You click on the component, and then on the right-hand side, let me make another one. When you'll have this button right here, it says variants. Once you've made your first variant, it's different, but for the very first variant of that component, you have to look on the right sidebar for this. And yeah, and I just made a component of a component, which is a nesting thing you sometimes do, but I don't want to get into that just yet. Once you've got a variant, I use variants a lot for like iterating ideas. So I've got this active button and this disable button, but now you'll have this little plus button, and you can start to add as many variants as you like. So maybe you want to do a variant like for a ghost button. And so your ghost button might not have a background color, and it's something like that. And so what you can do is, if you've got, like when we make our little UI card, we'll use this button, and then maybe on some of the, maybe you decide that you don't want to use the active button, you'll be able to come over here in the panel and change which version of the button you're actually using at any time, which is really handy, so that you can switch components anytime without having to rebuild your whole design or drag and drop them and stuff like that. So I'm gonna stop. I've got my button. I like my button. How are all y'all's buttons coming along? Let's see. Yo, this is a button. I have a simple sense of humor. Okay, so you've got one button and you've got your variant, and yeah, it looks like a button to me. Let's see, I'm curious how you made your button. So if you open up anything, you can see the inner frame. So I see you got text frame, looking at Jory's button, and then you've got the frame itself. I see, okay, you just changed that. That's what I was thinking when I was looking at the stroke around it. So, and it's nice to be able to look at how other people assemble their components. All of our components here should match, but when you're looking at other designs, like from the community files and stuff, it helps you learn how to make other designs. So or you got to kind of go and troubleshoot something with auto layout. The next part we're going to talk about is it, because it's kind of like, I want to say it's like Flexbox. I believe that's the right one. It's not CSS Grid. You can position things like Flexbox. So like you can have things like spread out or have them side by side in different ways. And sometimes when you do responsive design, it doesn't respond the way you expect it to. You have to go and look at all your frames and sort of figure out why that is. That was a really terrible font. That is okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to pick a good font randomly, so.
Right. I'm gonna try to find like a nice serif or like sans serif. I mean.
Yeah, I think there's like, I don't know. I use work sans every day because I just like it, and I can't use it in the app that I use, so I use it wherever else I can. I'm not a font I'm not criticizing your font choice. It's just a little hard to read. But yeah, you're seeing like right now on my screen, if you're looking or if you're following Daniel, you can see that as you're editing the main component, it's showing up to all the other ones. So let's take a look and see how you've constructed your button, because you shouldn't have to manually align your text like that because you use auto layout. If you don't have auto layout, you have to manually position things and then resize them depending on the text size, and then the padding is off, and it's very annoying. If you were to right click on the text frame and actually auto lay out the text frame itself, then it automatically will respond and you'll be able to position it exactly how you like. So I'll just to show you what I mean. If I make my button again and I add, somehow I've adopted your font. I don't know how that happened. Contagious. You type your text, and then if you right click it and you auto lay out the text directly, then now you've got this padding. I guess I didn't really I don't remember if I demonstrated the padding. You can do padding like equally all around. Let's say a padding of like 16, which is really big, or you could do padding and selectively make it like an 8 and an 8 so that the button is more rectangular, a longer rectangle. And then you can orient it this way. So this is the Flexbox part I was talking about. So I would center it like this. This means the text will always be in the center of my button. And if I fill it with the same color you've got there, then now if I stretch my frame, you'll see that the text always stays in the center, which is nice because then you can see it continues to keep the same like proportions to it. You could set it as a fixed width if you want. I don't want to go too far into this without you being able to see like where it would go in a card, for example, but I'm very excited about auto layouts. It's the thing that saves me the most time, I think. So.
Right on. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else want me to look at their button, or would you like to move on to the next step?
Yeah, so my top one is moving or is not moving, but the bottom one is resizing. I'm not sure what I did wrong here.
Let me see if I can find your cursor. There's this, let me see if you're moving. Okay, found ya. That's just because this little purple thing, if you stretch that, that is that's just what's holding your variance. So drag that to make it wider. So you select it and then drag it to the corner. There you go. And now it should respond better. So is that what you were talking about, or are you talking about the placement of the text?
Well, I was checking the placement of the text, but I think that should work now. No, that didn't work.
This is interesting. Let's see, why is this happening? So you've got text frame, and then you've got that auto layout, which is good. And then you've got the component, which is technically another frame. And it looks like you have an auto layout on the component. So you've got basically two auto layouts on there. So if you would just take the auto layout, remove it off of the layer named default, then I think you'll get what you're expecting. So if you select the frame, the outermost frame, like the default one, then in the right-hand sidebar, you'll have the ability to remove the auto layout with this little minus button or minus sign.
I am lost. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna select your button. So right now you've got, I'm selected on the outermost layer, and you see that we have auto layout, and you could remove it. So you just did that, and then the inside one also had auto layout, which is the one you probably want to have auto layout.
Okay.
You could do it either way, but you just having two of them is gonna make it. Why didn't it work? Let's see. There are these constraints, which I think let's see if that doesn't do it either. Control Z works, by the way, which is amazing. I wonder why it's not working. You've got your font or your text. Oh, I think it's the alignment. So if you look in the sidebar where it doesn't have a name, but it looks like an upside down bar graph right now. If you click on that, and I won't touch it, I want you to play with that alignment. If you shift it to be in the center, then I think that's what the other part is. Because what we're telling it right now is for the text to always be in the uppermost left corner.
Okay. There we go.
Yay. Which is nice if you're building something like on my first page, I had thrown together, I'll just copy it and bring it over so you don't have to move. I built this little like wireframe. This little gray thing was like to represent a logo, and then I've got this little nav bar. If you open that nav up, you'll see I've got what I called menu. Inside of, I've auto laid that out, which really I should have it always stay in the top left corner of this component, which is the like header bar. And then inside of that, I've got each of my little links is auto laid out like the button basically. And then I've auto laid them all out together. But if I wanted this to take up like the full width, for example, then you could do space between and see how they respond. Like they respond differently, which is according to like the web, responsive web properties. I think somebody might be on the, not sure whose mic might be on unintentionally, but we're hearing some extra home sounds back there. Dinner or something. My cat heard me and now he's like, dinner. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I don't know, the variants are fun. So let's go and make something new now. So let's draw a frame and we will make a UI card. I'm gonna grab just a picture. If you have like a basic idea of a UI card is you might have like a header text at the top, a button in one corner and some text in the middle and maybe some subtitles. So I'm just gonna grab a quick example from the web, but if you have a different one, you're welcome to, you don't have to copy mine. But just pick a simpler one and then we'll build that, and that should get us through a couple other basics, and we'll maybe try to prototype that really quickly too. And we'll, if you'd like, you can use an image in your card. So here's the example of a card I just grabbed off of some random article on the internet. This is the basic like structure of a card. This one's not styled. So I'm gonna start by drawing the frame to be the full body of the card. And then I like to think about how I'm going to do it before I do it, but usually not in the slow-mo. And then I'll add, probably start with like another frame and just color it gray as a placeholder for the image to start with. if you have an image on your computer, you can just drag and drop the image in instead. And you can see how the image works as a background, and we'll show you that too. And then I'm gonna also have a title, and I guess I'll do the short sum or paragraph of text there. And then I'll have a button. I think I'll use my button that I've already made. So those are kind of steps that I plan on taking to get there. So go ahead and draw a frame. You can size things as well. Like if you want your frame to be a certain size, I will just go with 5x4 or maybe a 4x5 card. Something kind of like that. And I want my card to have that image in there. So I'm just going to draw a frame. You can draw a frame within a frame. So I'm going to draw like a rectangular one, and you'll, as you're working in here, you'll see these red lines appear, and that's it helping things snap. So generally you want things to be aligned, and it helps you do that. So that's what those red lines are. So now I've got that frame, and I'm going to just use a basic gray for now until I put an image in there. So that's representative of the photo of the card. Cards are usually really visual, so I'll go and say it's going to be a pretty large photo, something like that. Some of the things I'm not personally skilled in just because it isn't what I do in the software I'm building, which is for lawyers, so there aren't pretty gradients and things. But you can do gradients in here and do like a cool fade out. I can't show you how to do that, but there are lots of talented folks that can, or if you are familiar with other design tools, I'm sure you could figure it out, because that's going to be in your fill tools here. So you can add another type of fill and I can do gradients. I'm just not very good at it. And you'd be able to do some of those things there. So right now I've got 2 frames. I'm going to take the time to go and name my frames because it will help us stay organized. You don't have to label every frame, but it helps me to do most of them. So I've got that, and I'm just really excited to use my button. So I guess I'm just going to go and grab my button. You can physically move your canvas around and go find your button, or this is a time where you could use the assets panel. I probably should do this more often, but if you open the assets panel in the left sidebar, you'll see all of our components available to us that we've created in this file. And then you can just select your button and drag it on over and save you a little bit of scrolling there. When I place my button on here, this is one thing, if you want to take a quick look, just in case you're not looking at my screen, this is the constraints for the button. So you made your button, now you're ready to place the button. I always want the object to stay on the lower left-hand corner of this card. So if it's a responsive web element, you're going to be having the card be wider or narrower depending on UI, for example, or the screen size. So whatever happens, I want my button to stay right there. So if I don't do any constraints, let's say I want it in the bottom right, that's going to be better. It just stays fixed and it doesn't move. And that's not how I want it. So I would select the button and then choose under this constraints section. I would struggle to verbally explain this because the image of it does so much of a better job. You have these different indicators of the positioning. So I'm just going to constrain it, and you'll kind of see these little blue dotted lines are kind of hard to see, but it tells me that it's always going to stay in the bottom right corner. And so now if I happen to resize my card, the button moves with it, and that's what I want. In my case, I actually want it to be in the bottom left. So I can put it wherever I like, and it'll just stay affixed to that left corner. So that's where I'm going to put it. And you can come and inspect this if you want to see it yourself when you get to this part if you're not there. It doesn't look that impressive if you're doing the left align like I did, which is why I showed you on the right side, because then you can actually see it in action. But it is helpful because maybe you expand your card the other direction. You still want it to be constrained, however is in the intended placement. So Ken was framed. Are you to say one that said this is a button? I'm not sure who said what, but I appreciate your humor. So Maybe it wasn't really Ken. Maybe someone else did that and like literally framed him. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna do some text. So I'm gonna grab my text tool and drop some text in here, and I will just say, a good UI card, and I will give it a bigger, oops. Sometimes when you don't have the whole thing selected, like it doesn't apply the changes. So that often happens to me. So I've got a larger font for that. I want this one to be constrained also. So even though this isn't auto laid out, I can constrain it. And sometimes I have to think like, okay, where do I need it to be constrained? And I think in this case, you don't always care, like depending what you're doing with your designs, you don't need to worry about the constraints. But if you're going to reuse things or want to resize them, then you do care about the constraints. I think I want this here, oriented to the left and towards the center. So it does use, you do see the words change, which is helpful. So sometimes if like the symbols aren't enough, so when you select the center vertical, telling me that I've aligned it vertically in the center, and then on the left horizontally. So those may or may not be super intuitive to you, but with practice, you'll get used to them. So now if I were to move this around, that's staying according to like the center of the card right there, which might not actually be what I want, but for now it's good enough, and you can always change it later. Okay, so now I'm going to do the summary, which is gonna be a paragraph. You can go and add another text element, or you could do a Control-D to copy the one. Oh, hold on one second. It is dinner time for the cats. John is feeding the cats. Okay, so you can Control-D it if you want. It's just faster that way. And if you look in the left panel, you'll see that you've got those copies. And then I just move it down and then adjust my font. So there's lots of different ways to do different things. And as I'm typing, you'll notice that the text just went off of the rails. So that's because you can do different text properties like you would in CSS. And right now it's auto width. So if I have a text that is 1,000,000 miles long, it will have a frame that expands that amount for it. So I'm going to do auto height, which means I'm going to control the height. So I want it, or I'm going to control the width, and it will get as high or as tall as it needs to accommodate that text. So now if I keep typing, it stays where I want it to. And then again, you can orient that, which I think this one I think I'm just gonna leave it here. Probably as I'm thinking through this, what I'm realizing now is I actually want a frame for all this stuff in the white area. I want a frame that holds my button and my text, both text elements. So here's where I'm going to start making a lot of auto frames. So I'm going to stop and see what else everyone else is up to before I do that. And that way, before you you can watch what I'm doing. So is anyone stuck or have any questions or thoughts? Okay. You can ask at any time. So I'm changing my name here. There. Got a decent UI card here. So what I was saying is, and this happens sometimes, I really like building components. Sometimes if you're doing a simple design, maybe you don't need to think this hard about components and frames, and you can just throw stuff up and it's good enough. It really depends. So it's just something I really enjoy and also really need to do. But so what I would do at this stage is realize these should be in auto layout. So first I'm going to auto layout the body text here, and I'll just go ahead and name it just so that it's clear. And this is the title. So I'm going to auto lay out these two, the body and the title together. So just select them both and then apply your auto layout. Now I've got these auto laid out and I'm just going to call that text. So that's one element on the card. And now because they're auto laid out, they've automatically aligned to the left. And I can now put the padding, the space between that I think they need to have. So I'll go with 16 pixels. That seems decent. And I'm going to leave it constrained to the left for now. I'm not going to adjust that. So I've got this auto layout with two text items. Now I'm going to auto lay out my button and the text. So if I select them both and auto lay out those, they'll snap to the left again, which is what I want. And now I've got this frame. So I'll just call this the body. This is the body of the card. And so now what I'm going to do is just going to pull this off to make this clearer. I'm going to stop using this basic frame that I originally drew because now I realize there's a better way to do it, and just add my colors here. So I'll make it white. Because it's auto laid out, you can see the spacing here. So the spacing between the text and the button is 65. I think what I actually want is to try using space between. I really want the button to stay. Let's see, this might take a little experimenting. I'll go back to keeping it packed. So I'll just separate these. You can do math in here. So I tend to use 8s, like base 8, mostly because it's easier and it looks nice, but it's also really easy. So I'll do 64 apart. So now I've got my card, spacing looks decent. I'll probably want to adjust it so it's better visually looking. It looks like now I'm going to add a margin to it. So if you're familiar with margins, padding around the item, I don't want like this to be my card where all the text is right up, super close to the edges like that. So I'll try something, let's say 24. That looks pretty good. It's decent. So now I've got the body of my card. And so you can kind of see how I move from just a flat frame to something that now is responsive. And ideally, if I resize my frame, like things should stay somewhat consistent. And now I've got the body, I'm going to actually do the image. So I was using this placeholder image. I think I'm going to shove that off to the side, and we'll put the I'm just thinking, I think I'll auto lay them out together. So also this image placeholder here and the body, I'm going to grab them both and auto lay them out, and then I'll just have 0 space between them. And what I just did there was saying fill the container. So if the container is really wide, then this frame is going to stretch to match it. And the same on this one. So that now my card is more responsive. So now I've created my card minus the image, and I could take it, make it into a component. And as I just noticed there, I tried to round the edges and it didn't work. So there's always lots of fun things you expect to happen and they don't. Probably because I had to apply the border radius independently to each of those. So that is probably just fun for another day. I will not do that right now. So let's see how everyone else's cards are looking. I feel like that was kind of a lot, and maybe if you're super familiar with design tools, it wasn't, but otherwise it was a lot of information. So how's everyone doing? You're really cracking me up. Well, I will make my card a component now. And so I would encourage you to, let's see, actually. We only have like 2 cards up here, so, and that's fine. Looking to see if there's anybody in the other pages. So let's see what Ken has going on. Do you mind if I look at your card, Ken?
No, that's be good.
Okay.
So I did the auto layout here, but it didn't like, well, maybe it did. Maybe the bottom one had different dimension or size. I was trying to change the background, the fill on this part, but it's only giving me a selection color. So how would you, like yours is white here?
Mm-hmm.
What am I not doing?
I think because I think you're selected on the right item. You should have. Are you selected on frame 20? Like if you look in the left in the sidebar, is that the one that you're highlighted on?
Okay.
Okay. You should. I think you're in the right spot, but sometimes it's hard to see it because when it's not being hovered over where it says fill, you might be missing it. So it's there, and if you hover over on your sidebar, you'll find fill. It's below resizing and layer.
Fill, got it.
And then you click the plus button to add your fill.
Yep.
It looks like your text is centered, which is fine. So yours is behaving differently than mine because mine was left aligned and yours is center aligned. So that's part of why your text is in that direction.
Got it. Okay.
But you've got your text auto layout the same. They just look different because one is left aligned text and one is center aligned. So you could pick one or the other. I'd probably left align it. That's typically how you usually see a card. And then you'll see it.
Okay.
And you just aren't seeing your text now because your fill layer is the same color as your text.
Yeah. Yeah. So Control Z is your friend.
It is. That there are a few keys on my keyboard where the letters are worn off. So surprisingly, that's not one of them. But
Okay. All right. So if we go here, we'll get our and then we'll go to this guy and we'll get left aligned. All right.
great. And then if you do your fill, it'll.
All right. So let me change something there here. Red. And then we'll do a fill. Add. Okay.
There you go. And let's see. So now you've got, that's your body basically. And so now you've got that on frame 22, the auto layout. What I did was I put those auto layout with 0 spacing. So they're right against each other. So that might be.
Okay.
They recently added tooltips, which is kind of nice. Those weren't, they've always had some tooltips, but I'm noticing today that there are more tooltips, which is nice. So I don't know if you. And I've got it on my screen if you need to see. Oh, you got it.
All right.
Cool. So I think I'll go and put a real, maybe let me see if I can put an image in here. Let me see if I have any cool photos on my computer. I have my background image at least. So I don't work with photos a ton, but I think the way you select wherever the frame, which I have labeled photo or image, and then you come over to fill, and then instead of doing a color fill, you're going to do a photo. So when you there's a couple ways. I usually click the color like swatch in the corner where it says fill or on the sidebar, and once you've done that, you'll see the color selector window. And so then you'll see this drop down in the top, which is where you can then choose an image. So I'm going to switch it to an image, and it just throws in this checkerboard thing. And then you can go and grab an actual image on your to add there. And then it does have some photo editing stuff. I haven't really maxed these out, but you can do basic stuff in here, which I guess is it's just cool for some like UI effects. I probably wouldn't advocate using it as a full-on image editor, but you can also, like, it's set to fill, and what I might do is set it to crop so that I can, if I remember how to crop, I don't really remember. There we go. And then you can get the placement that you like there. And And for any, like, we're kind of getting close to the end here. So, okay, promise there'll be some resources to share with you. If you already are looking at them, they're actually, most of them I have here on the first page, but I will paste them into Meetup as well. So there's some different things. These YouTube channels are, some of them are really relatively new. I took like a Udemy course when I was first learning Figma, but the other second best resource was Figma's YouTube channel is amazing. But now that Figma is even more popular, these are some of the people, some of the designers I follow, and they have some new Figma courses that are just really, really good. So basically everything I've done today and more, and you can pause and stop and skip and all those sorts of things. So those are really useful. And there's just so many good resources out there. I think I mentioned briefly the community, and I think I will just very briefly show you in the community what that looks like. So to get into the community, you go to the home in Figma, and that you'll see community here. They also have it, I think there's a link on their website, but when you get to the community, you can see just a taste of what all is out here. So you can define UI kits. If you're, like in my previous job doing, marketing pages, it probably would have been really beneficial to use UI kits, because I was building like between 5 to 10 page websites. It wasn't, and maybe I might have done wireframing. I actually used another app for wireframing, which worked fine. I'm such a perfectionist that sometimes I spend too much time fiddling with things. And so maybe wireframing in Figma isn't the best place for you to wireframe if you are like me. But if you're trying to do something a little more complex, or you are pretty good at, you're not so, you don't spend so much time optimizing the simplest wireframe, then there's lots of ones you can just grab. And the way that you use them, like it looks like they have, they all say who's published them, and you can see how many people have downloaded them, and comments and favorites and stuff. I've used this one before, this user flow kit. And so the way you can get in here and look at all the pages and the resources that they have, some of them will be many pages long. And if you decide that you like this and you want to use it, you just click to duplicate it. And what that does is then it copies, it's kind of like forking on GitHub. It copies the file, and then you can, now it's yours, and you can use it however you like without, modifying their file. And so this is a way that a lot of people put resources out there, and the other way is through plugins. So plugins there's some really cool ones. A couple of them are on that resources list, but like Unsplash, if you've used Unsplash for images, you can do that. There's lots of different icon plugins. Blush Design, which does really beautiful graphics. They have a graphic design library. It's really cool right here. So lots of different stuff, and new ones every day. Or if you want to make your own plugin, there's plugins to make data tables and all kinds of things. It looks like Tailwind, I think, I don't know if that's like Tailwind CSS or who made that, but you can find almost anything you want there. So I just want to leave that there, and you can go and look in there for stuff. And Figma publishes things on like how to get really good at auto layout. I feel like I still have a lot more I could be using auto layout for, but it's just way too fun nesting auto layout all day, and I have to talk to users and things too. So anyway, that pretty much concludes what I had to show you. Do you have any questions that fall outside of this, or anything on what we've been doing in Figma that anyone wants to bring up at this point?
That was really good. Thank you.
Thanks for playing along with me in there and your sense of humor. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But yeah, if anyone wants to learn Figma, then if this is your first time using Figma, this wasn't necessarily the easiest stuff I showed you, but it was a way to kind of show off some of the main features of it. So if you have anything at any point, like I said, just I'm in Slack or on LinkedIn. So happy to talk about Figma or UX.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That was an awesome presentation.
Thanks for having me.
All right. All right. So
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying thank you for the presentation. It was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you're in the Slack channel, as soon as this video goes, it gets downloaded into the cloud, I'll go ahead and put the link there, and you could go ahead and rewatch this video if you ever need to, or if you ever want to. This is very helpful though. I think I used this software like 3 times, and it was actually pretty nice. I thought it was a little bit easier than XD.
I think so too. And I think it's because it's so similar to, like, after having worked in the browser for a while, but also I might have been more motivated, or having known XD was easy to learn Figma. I'm not sure, but I feel like it's easier.
All right.
Yeah, what's your guys' opinion on Adobe Xd versus Figma? Like what made you want to go with Figma over Adobe XD?
Well, Figma, I guess I feel like I want to say their YouTube is just very, very so informative, and they just could show you the power of what it could do. And I don't think there's probably power of XD that I didn't realize, because the way that I went about learning, it just didn't seem so powerful to me. And second reason was, maybe tying with that, is that the collaboration is so much better in Figma. Last time I used XD, there was no real-time collaboration where you could see cursors. Realistically, I design alone almost all the time, so that's not a big deal, but I hope that in the future we'll hire more designers. And I do have a product manager jump in there with me, and I like the idea I could send a link to anyone, if it's a public link, and they can view my prototype or whatever, which with Adobe, when I was doing that, and I felt like I had so many issues with the Adobe Cloud. So that really annoyed me. And I just felt like they were kind of lagging in some of the features. That's really the 2 biggest reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like how with Adobe, you know, like you could edit photos on Photoshop or on Illustrator or whatever you need to do, and then it does get transferred to the cloud, and then from there it's available to XD. But I think the navigation was kind of like the pain point for me, and I just didn't like it. It got to the point where it was just it wasted so much time. I just didn't really care about that feature anymore.
Yeah, I think that my work one is like, I've got just previously, until like a few months ago, the free version, I think you could have a lot more pages and files, but they limited it recently. But I have like a lot in my work one, and I can organize things so well. So I can have basically projects, and I can either say everyone can access a project, or it's just private to me. So basically the concept of having folders and files in them, and I can open up any computer, any browser at any time, and log in, and they're all there. And you can export and save Figma, like .fig files, but that's not like something you ever think about. And there's version control built in, which I guess is a big deal, because to me, I'm like, oh, version control, I feel like that's probably a given, but it's really not with other tools. And there are actually different tools to add versioning to, like, say, Sketch, for example. And so there's some basic versioning built in. So like I could go back and revert. Sometimes we reverse a design decision, and I've like probably should have made a copy and I didn't. And I like delete a bunch of documents, like a page of documentation, and change my components. And then they're like, never mind, or there's a miscommunication. I can go back and restore from that point. And that's really helpful. So that saved me from some rework. And that's pretty cool that, you know, again, and then the publishing of components. I take it back. Components is the #1 reason why I love Figma. Components are amazing. So that's why. I don't know if you can do that in Adobe, and if you can publish them across files and through like across projects.
Any more questions, anyone? Or I mean, normally so I mean, you could have questions about the presentation, or this is also open discussion as well. If you have any questions that Yvette might know, especially with her dealing with a lot of the UX, UXD.
Hi. Yeah, or I don't know. I did have 2 things that were unrelated also. I know you made some announcements, but I also saw that there's a social alumni meetup tomorrow night. And for deep dive. And then on top of that, there's next week, I'm part of the New Mexico UX group. So if you are interested in design, even if it's just like tangentially, because whatever you're working on, that meetup is very very helpful and useful. And the topic is actually, I recommended the speaker. I'm very excited because she just wrote a book called Design for Safety, and she was in a Slack channel I'm in, and she's like, if anyone needs presenters, and I was like, come and present for us in Albuquerque. So virtually she'll be presenting, and that's next Tuesday. So I thought I would plug that because it's kind of exciting for us to have an author come and speak, but more so, I think if you're designing products or building products or involved in it in any way, it's important to keep safety in mind. Like, so that's a very salient topic, I think. But the UX meetup is a great place for more UX topics, although we also started that UX channel in Slack for deep dive. So there should hopefully be more UX talk there too.
Awesome. Well, I mean, if there's nothing else, then thank you, Yvette, for throwing this presentation. It was really awesome. I really did like how interactive it was. You hardly ever see that in presentations.
Nobody was prepared for that. It makes it more fun for me too.
It is. I think hands-on is definitely some of the best approaches to really demonstrating anything instead of just kind of sitting there and not, just kind of sitting there and watching. But all right. Well, I hope everyone has a good night. And stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, Joseph, too.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yvette.
Thanks, everyone.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys.
Take care.
Yep. See you, everybody.
Hey guys, thank you.
You're welcome.